What happened at a wedding that let you know the marriage was going to end in a divorce? The groom looked drunk and the bride seemed incredibly angry. Then there was this woman walking around during the reception placing bets on when they would divorce. I later found out she was the mother of the groom. The groom said in his speech, "When I joined a dating agency, I never thought I'd be so lucky as to find my own personal cook, dishwasher, and washing machine. Not only is that a crappy way to describe anyone, he's in for a nasty surprise when he realizes his wife is actually a complete diva and will expect him to do all those things for her. Bad relationship all around." Groom's mistress found out he was getting married and showed up at the wedding, in the middle of the I do's, walked right up on stage and smacked him in the face, pulling a Will Smith slap before the Will Smith slap even happened. The groom stabbed his new brother-in-law to death with the knife used to cut the wedding cake, no less. Well, technically it happened at the reception, not the wedding. Yeah, that's a detail I was worried about, and not the fact that somebody was stabbed to death at a wedding. Backstory. About 4 years before the wedding, the wife's brother had shot her in the leg during an argument. Yes, alcohol was involved. At the reception, he started loudly telling the guests that he wished he'd shot her in the head instead, at which point the groom got stabby. Alcohol was, again, involved. At the rehearsal dinner, the groom's mom is in tears because he looks miserable. And he was. We all knew it. During the vows they had written for each other, the bride starts with, "I know I could be a pretty terrible person, and I don't know why you've stuck around, but that's all going to change starting today." They were divorced a year later. She flinched when he turned to kiss her. They were divorced within 6 months. The bride had the minister put "till death or divorce do us part" into the ceremony. My cousin, the bride, told us as she was going from table to table thanking the guests that she didn't think it would last. We were stunned. They lasted about a year. I thought my sister's wedding was. Her husband got blackout drunk and they got into an argument. He passed out and she ended up throwing a bucket of ice water in his face to snap him out of it. She was devastated about it. Happy ending, he made it up to her big time. Also, he felt very out of it, even the next day. Turns out he had traces of Rohypnol in his system. His own brother roofied him in hopes he wouldn't marry my sister because he wanted their own friendship to remain the same. My brother-in-law has disowned most of his family because of this, and his brother just got out of a 4-year prison sentence. The bride, whom I didn't even know, apparently designated me to help decorate the reception hall prior to the wedding. I went to do so, and her mother was there, telling me in a hushed, scared whisper that I better not mess anything up because the bride would be furious. Everything was to be a certain way, and if it was wrong, there'd be hell to pay. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, chalked it up to wedding anxiety, and during the reception, I tried to chat with her a bit, and she literally rolled her eyes at me. I also didn't see her look at the groom once, at the wedding or the reception. They were split less than a year later. Later, the groom confided to me and my husband that the morning of the wedding, he'd been filled with an overwhelming feeling of dread and spent several hours just sitting on his lawn thinking, "I shouldn't do this." But it was paid for, tons of guests were waiting, lots of family, including us, had come in from out of state, and he felt he had to go through with it. Apparently, the bride had a history of being awful and controlling. No clue what made him propose to her in the first place. Edit. Just Facebook stalked the ex-bride. Her latest status update is announcing her wedding date with a new guy. Someone jokingly asked in the comments if they set a date for the divorce. Oh snap! Holy crap. My cousin Jan's wedding was basically just a preamble to an elaborate dance of divorce that we all knew was coming from the moment the engagement began. For context, this took place 15 years ago in the backwoods of North Carolina. My family is just a generation or two removed from snake handling in church, so some of the wackiness is the product of upwardly mobile inbreeding and redneck gumption. Just a few things that come to mind. Her fiancé proposed to her over the corpse of her father. He was over with the family watching TV when Jan's dad collapsed on the floor. He died before emergency services arrived. Her boyfriend grabbed her hands as she was sitting next to her father's body, pulled her up to her feet, and then asked her to marry him. He later said that he didn't want her to get away. The fiancé then disappeared for a month the week after the funeral. Nobody knew where to find him. The bride's white trash mother told Jan that she had to get married within 4 months because she, the mother, my aunt, planned to move to another state with her new boyfriend to avoid bill collectors. When Jan's fiancé showed back up, he was cagey and weird. Eventually, it came out that he'd been living with his ex-girlfriend because she insisted that he had to give to her a month of his life, or she'd take him to court for child support that he was supposed to be paying on their infant son, but had never paid. Throughout all of this, Jan continued to insist that she wanted to marry him. My mother and I did most of the wedding prep and arrangements. Jan's mom, despite insisting on the 4-month timeline to help pay for the wedding before her move, never contributed a dime. And we were both pretty convinced that the wedding was going to be canceled at any moment. But the day arrived, and so did the principal players. At the wedding itself, the groom walked around drinking PBR out of a massive travel thermos with a novelty straw and told everyone who would listen that Jan was a good starter wife. Jan threw several tantrums about stupid stuff, including one in which she accused the groom of stealing her drink. He told her she was a dumb woman, but it all worked out because she then found her drink. The groom pulled the ring off of Jan's finger during the reception and swallowed it as a joke. The groom picked a fight with his father because his dad had asked the ex-girlfriend to stay at home, and the groom had really wanted her to be there. Jan was in the dark about this invitation until the fight broke out. Epilogue, shocking precisely nobody, except possibly Jan herself, they eventually did divorce. Eating the ring caused the groom some discomfort, so they had to cancel their honeymoon to the mountains so that he could go to the ER and get hospital-grade laxatives. They lost money on the cancellation and the ER visit, which they really didn't have to lose. That resulted in some immediate debt problems, and they lost the trailer they planned to rent when they couldn't come up with a deposit. That resulted in both of them moving into the groom's parents' home into his old bedroom. Things went downhill from there. The groom's ex-girlfriend popped back up less than 3 months after the wedding, heavily pregnant with a second child. She went after him for another shared month, but Jan wasn't cool with it. The ex ended up taking him to court for child support. Jan got a second job to make ends meet while resigning herself to living with her in-laws for a while longer. One day, after he dropped her off at work, the groom sold Jan's car. He then disappeared for several more weeks. She lost both jobs and shortly thereafter realized she was pregnant. The groom accused her of cheating because he thought he couldn't have more than 2 children in a lifetime, and his ex-girlfriend had already filled the quota. As I understand it, this is what ultimately caused the rift in their relationship. Back to normal stories. Groom got caught getting frisky with the bridesmaid. That marriage lasted for about 2 hours. When the father of the bride tells the groom, "How can you marry somebody like her? You are too nice. You deserve better." Surely enough, the marriage lasted less than 3 years. During the whole time, the wife was doing drugs and prostituted herself to get money for drugs. We knew the couple was in trouble when they frowned during most of the ceremony and later didn't go on a honeymoon because they couldn't agree on a destination. They had plenty of money, just no desire to compromise. At the end of the reception, the guys were sitting at a table away from everyone else talking, and we asked the groom why he proposed. His answer? Because she was naked. Marriage lasted about 1.5 years. At my brother's wedding, his bride gave him the cheek at the "you may kiss the bride" part. Yeah, she ended up cheating on him with some guy online in less than a year. My sister's new husband made out with the bridesmaid on the dance floor of the reception. During the ceremony, when the priest started asking the bride, "Do you take this man to be your..." she started laughing uncontrollably and couldn't stop. It was cute for about 10 seconds and then things got real uncomfortable. They lasted 1 year and change. We all kinda knew the only reason they were getting married was because she got pregnant. Groom got so drunk at the reception he passed out in the honeymoon suite by himself, but not before he latched the door so it couldn't be unlocked from the outside. Seeing the bride kicking the door and hollering at the top of her lungs to be let in at 3 a.m. was not encouraging. They divorced like 2 years later. I was working at a wedding factory. On Monday, we got a call the Saturday wedding was canceled. They were told that they would lose the deposit, around $7,000. Then on Thursday, they said it was back on. When the guests arrived, everyone was mad. It seems they told everyone that it was off, then 2 days later that it was on. The ceremony was about 3 minutes. The bride then changed into sweatpants and then everyone got angry drunk. Well, this won't last long, I thought. Then on the following Monday, the bride walked into my then-wife's divorce attorney's office. Our friend was the girl who had spent a whole year setting up for the one day. They had taken 6 months of dancing lessons, and she has spent a ridiculous amount of time looking good and dressing up her bridesmaids for the wedding, of which my wife was one. So, come the night of the wedding, the groom meets up with his old friends and starts to get blackout drunk. He got so drunk he didn't even recognize us, rather just pushing us aside to get to the bathroom. The worst part was the dance itself. It was really heartbreaking to see them stumble around and watch the panic on her face as he realized he had no idea what was going on. I gave it 6 months at the time, but they ended up 3 years. She ended up marrying another woman. Groom mashed the cake into the pregnant bride's face so hard she went down backwards. Groom and his father ended up fistfighting in the bathroom, cops were called, fun times. It was a shotgun wedding. They proudly proclaimed it as such. Overheard the bride's mother saying that the bride was such a later bloomer for waiting until 19 to trap herself a man. The child is 3 years old and they have been separated, don't know if divorced, since she was 1. Walking in on the groom getting railed by one of the groomsmen in the suite at the resort during the reception. My cousin's wedding. The groom invited his ex, who was also the mother of his 1-year-old son. He and my cousin had been dating for longer than 2 years, and my cousin, who was then very pregnant herself, got into a loud screaming match with him over it in a bathroom. They eventually came out and got married, my cousin with puffy red eyes from crying that you can see in every wedding photo that was taken. They spent $50,000 on a Disney wedding, and the bride spent zero time anywhere near the in-laws for several hours. She ran off a week later. While saying the classic "I do," instead of looking deep into his bride's eyes, the groom was peeking at one of the bridesmaids. I do audio-visual for social events, a lot of weddings. At one engagement party, my coworker tells the story of the soon-to-be groom trying to carry off his soon-to-be bride, because he's manly and will have his way with her. Anyways, she is screaming at him to put her down, and when he finally complies, she slaps him right across the face and yells, "I'm not done dancing!" When I was 17, I was a bridesmaid in my 19-year-old cousin's shotgun wedding. After the ceremony, we got into the limo to go to the reception. She turns to me and says, "God, I wish I was single." The groom didn't look at the bride once. Sister's wedding. Husband ends speech saying, "Thanks for settling for me." 18 months later, agreed to divorce. 4 people made speeches. The bride joked about the first time she dated the groom when she was 16 and he was 26. The groom was wasted and spoke about how each of the previous times they broke up didn't count and that they would do it right this time. The maid of honor talked about how even when they were broken up, they still got along, and the best man made crappy jokes. Groom's brother didn't attend because he too had banged the bride before. The groom invited his female friend. She was in the early stages of pregnancy. Towards the end of the night, the bride asked aforementioned friend who the father was. The friend cheerfully said the groom's name. The bride got blackout drunk and asked me to kill her husband. He was busy fighting one of his groomsmen in the other room. They divorced 2 years later. The day of her wedding, I asked my sister-in-law if she was enjoying her day, and all she said was, "It's a freaking nightmare. This is the worst day of my life." Dude said the wrong name at the altar. When I read this one, I went, uh-oh. I was reunited with a family member just before her wedding. We went out drinking, and she proudly pointed out a guy at the bar that she'd just gone on a trip with and had a week-long prenup rail romp. She seemed to think I'd think that was naughty and funny. I just felt bad for her future husband, but figured it was just a bad choice. The day of the wedding, I went to see her in the bridal suite. She had the guy there with him. She screwed him the night before the wedding. They lasted a few years, but it was a miserable few. My cousin married a nice, respectable girl from Connecticut, but he is a not-so-nice, not-so-respectable Massachusetts stereotype from Norfolk County. Cuz got drunk with his band of Mickeys and Sullys the night before, and when I saw him for pictures that morning, he was sucking on a pint of Skull vodka before throwing it in the corner of the church and calling his friend a slur. He had the same grin on his face for every picture. I pumped some coffee into him. We thought we had it under control, but during the ceremony, he flipped off the guest twice. His brother also taped "Help Me" on the bottom of his shoes for when they took the mass. The bride's father was furious. But then came the reception. My mom didn't want to go. I wish we hadn't. Cuz continued sucking down booze, as did his pals. The bride, God save her, wanted to go ahead with the first dance, Stand By Me. Cuz didn't put down his drink, was grabbing her butt during the dance, and finally spilled it all down her dress. She slapped him, he pushed her. Father of the groom charges the dance floor. The bench is clear. My brother and I ask Mom if she wants us to get involved. She grabs her purse and says, "Let's leave." As his buddies were holding Cuz back, she walked over, slapped him, and said, "Thank God your grandmother died, you disgraceful little Mick." Mama is a very quiet woman. We grabbed Mama and hightailed it out. 2 cops passed us on the way in. They began the annulment 1 week later. I haven't talked to him since, although he emailed me asking if he could borrow $5,000. He lives in a camper from what I hear. Friend got married. On his honeymoon, his wife went to the spa. He stayed in the room to chill. Housekeeping came, young cute girl. Friend paid her for head. Told me about all proud. Didn't last a year. Toward the end of the reception, the bride suggested to the groom he run home and change into street clothes so they could clean the venue and get the deposit returned. Groom got back, and bride had opened all the gift envelopes and paid back relatives with the cash they contained. Source: the groom was me. I was in charge of choosing a male strip club for the bachelorette party. I went to check a place out. Bumped into the groom in the audience. We've got a timeline for this one. A bunch of my family members are betting on how long one of my cousin's marriage would last. It's definitely going to end in divorce, but we just don't know when. Here's all the crap that happened. Pre-wedding, the couple can't even agree on invitation card designs, so they decided each would have their own. Some people received 2 invitations. Wedding. They're both from different races, and the groom's family insisted on having a wedding ceremony from their culture too. The bride refused the part where she has to kneel before her husband and wash his feet clean. The groom's family insisted, and she was stuck doing it. The bride got tired with all the photo taking and refused to pose for any more photographs, even though she hadn't taken photos with the groom's extended family. Meanwhile, she had already taken photos with her entire family, extended family, and parents' friends. The groom's cousin told the bride she walked in elegantly and she spent hours crying and refusing to come out for the wedding dinner. Half the groom's family boycotted the wedding over the bride's race and religion. Post-wedding, the bride insisted they should fly first class for their honeymoon. The groom insisted it's a waste of money, even though they had both come from money. The bride flew first class, the groom stuck to economy. Wedding was going okay until the bride and groom got hammered, groom's baby mama ex showed up, and the bride proceeded to lock herself in a room crying and continuing to drink by herself. It was a crap show to say the least. OP says, "How long do you wait to leave in a scenario like that?" I wasn't there, but my neighbor is a wedding DJ. Apparently a couple of weeks ago, she was at a wedding where the bride did her first dance with her ex, who for some reason was invited, because he was a better dancer than her new husband, and she didn't want to get, in her words, shown up. My cousin got his casual hookup pregnant, and somehow they came to the conclusion that they needed to get married. Instead of going and getting quietly married, they decided they needed a gigantic, expensive wedding. Like 5-course meal, 300 plus guests, 12 bridesmaids kind of wedding. Obviously, something like this takes a while to plan, and as a result, she was about 7 months pregnant. Now, nothing wrong with going down the aisle while expecting, but she chose this corseted dress that was cinched so tight it nearly flattened her bump out. As someone who has been pregnant, I can't imagine how uncomfortable that must have been. The fact that they had only known each other 8 months and she was 7 months pregnant was like the elephant in the room the entire wedding. She refused to acknowledge the fact that she was pregnant. She had been out of college for 10 plus years and invited all her sorority sisters. They got up and all sang this weird sorority song together. Very odd for an over 30 woman. I'm probably not explaining it very well, but it was like she was trying to act like she was much younger. They were married about 4 years, way longer than anyone thought it would last. Married less than a year, and a mutual friend my wife and I had got married. During the ceremony, my wife is crying, and I asked her why, expecting a response of happy for him or something, and she said, "I always thought I would be the one to marry him." She ended up cheating on me with him, and we went our separate ways. They only got married because they screwed unprotected on their first date and conceived a child. Fast forward a few months, the bride objects to going to the groom's friend for flowers for the wedding, because she has a religious objection to the gay lifestyle, in quotes. Turns out she's also incredibly racist. The groom is not homophobic or racist at all, and was appalled to find out that his new wife wouldn't approve of most of his friends. The baby hasn't even been born yet, and the divorce is pending. The groom saying the bride looked really chubby in her wedding dress. The groom making fun of the deaf grandmother. The groom existing. Not all of it was at the wedding, but on our way to our honeymoon, we were on a flight with this couple sitting behind us. She boarded the plane with a giant carry-on and a garment bag with a dress in it. Once they found their seats, she shoved her bags at him to put away, and then went to use the lavatory for about 15 minutes. She was really nasty towards him the whole time. Fast forward into running into them at the resort. She was super stuck up and a jerk to every female and all of the staff. She didn't seem to have a problem grinding on 4 or 5 different guys during one of the dance night themed events while her husband drank alone at the bar. Finally, the day of their wedding came, and my husband ran into the groom sitting alone outside of the cafe with a drink in his hand. He sat down to chat with him, and the guy explained that he was freaking out because they had no friends or family at the wedding, because literally no one that knew him liked her or approved of the wedding, and that he wasn't even sure what he was doing there. My husband tells him he's sure it's cold feet, and to just have a drink to calm his nerves. The groom replies that it's his 5th drink. It's like 11 a.m. already. We had an oceanfront villa, and they got married right outside of our back door. He looked like he was going to bolt for sure. I guess that was her plan the whole time, trap him on a remote island. Her vows. They were friends of mine who dated for nearly 2 years before their wedding. He loved her more than she loved him, obvious to all our friends, and we suspected she begrudgingly said yes to his proposal. He said his vows first and went on and on about loving her for the rest of his life. During hers, she started with 438 days. That's how long I've loved you. It seemed sweet until she ended her vows with, and I promise to love you for at least 438 more. Most thought nothing of it, and some friends called me a jerk for saying it was a subconscious sign that she wasn't in it for the long haul. She left him exactly that amount of days after the wedding, with the note that said, "I kept my vow to love you for 438 days more, but I can't for a single day more." Called it. At the wedding, bride-to-be turns up 30 minutes late, arrives inconsolably sobbing, helped down the aisle. Ceremony weird and filled with cries from the bride. Afterwards, spoke to the bride's father and asked how things were. His response, "Well, that was like getting a cat in a paper bag." Divorced 3 months later. Backstory, the groom, whom we knew, was from a wealthy family. Bride's family saw money and persuaded their darling daughter to marry the guy. She realized the mistake. She ended up with nothing. His family had money, but the groom was young and had nothing. Screwed up people out here, folks. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.